Hi, everybody. I'm Wanda Baader from Strategize Your Success. I'm a marketing coach and consultant, and I have a boutique marketing agency in Tucson, Arizona. And thank you so much for your patience and waiting for us to start the show. We had a little technical issue, but thank you, Lynden, for joining us, and thank you, Dan, for helping her get on.
My pleasure.
So Lynden, please go ahead and introduce yourself because everybody's been waiting for you. We're so excited to have you here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, and I apologize for the technical challenges. It seems like the system was recognizing the wrong camera, so I couldn't be seen. At any rate, I am Lynden Kidd, and I'm with Next Iteration. A division of my company is called Captivating Careers. And I consider myself a career strategist. So I've spent a whole lot of years, I coach my clients to say I have extensive experience working with people who are in that transitional phase of their life, which means their career. It might be in the process of, changing, or maybe somebody's reached the point where they decided they're bored silly with what they're doing and they're ready for something new, or maybe they're finding they're unemployed, regretfully, and this is a tough time still to be unemployed, or underemployed, just not challenged by the work that they do. So I've spent a majority of my career thinking about how people, get from one job to another. I've done that officially as an executive recruiter in the professional retained recruiting space, but then I've also had my own firm for a number of years. So I literally have interviewed thousands of people and helped hundreds of people find work. And so I just have that sweet spot of having an appreciation for that transition in life. And so that's really where I get a lot of my ideas and where I really like to serve people. So with that said, that's me.
Okay, well, welcome today. We're going to get into the subject in just a second, but I want Dan to also introduce himself. Dan, go ahead and tell everybody where you hail from.
Okay, sure. So I'm based out of Kansas City. I live on the Kansas side of the line, about 3 miles. So on the southwest quadrant of Kansas City, in a little town called Overland Park, and in Johnson County. And I'm with Our Connected Lives. So do some coaching, some mentoring, some keynoting, some training, and my heart is for the entrepreneurs that are between startup and stability. So that's a little about me.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Dan, so much for joining us today and being my co-pilot. Dan's going to keep a lookout for your questions, or if you want to jump in, we have saved an open seat for anybody who wants to jump in live and maybe ask Lynden a question or join our discussion. So if you have a question, it is /Q that you have to put in before you type in your question, so it comes up as a question and we can see it. But Dan will look out regardless if you forget. That's right. And again, you can just jump in whenever you think that you might have a question and want to join in on the conversation. So obviously, as you could see from our tweet and our Balb title, why employees leave is the grass really greener somewhere else, is what Lynden was going to talk about today. Now, why do people leave their jobs, Lynden? I mean, you're the expert. You can tell us all the time. People are coming and going. I would say it's probably even more dominant nowadays because people get bored, right?
Well, it is. And the millennials are more likely to change jobs than any other group that's in the workforce right now. And so that's an interesting juxtaposition. But people leave the jobs they're in because there's no possibility of advancement. And I'm looking at my notes. They're underappreciated. They don't feel challenged. In many cases, they hate their boss. And this is a theme that we need to be aware of. They don't have any work-life balance, whether that really exists or not, but they have a sense that it doesn't for them. And there's too much stress on the job. Sometimes some jobs are just, employees find themselves overwhelmed with what's going on with them. They find themselves overworked. And this is so true. During the recession, we saw so many companies lay people off. We saw people, or when people left by attrition, just natural attrition, they weren't replaced in many cases. And so the employees that were left find themselves overworked, and there's no relief for the work that they've got. The benefits may not be where they should be, or where the employee feels like they should be. And then this is kind of a subtle thing, but maybe the people that they work with stink. You know, maybe that if they're not the kind of people that they want to be working with, maybe they've got different values. Maybe the culture that they're trying to fit into isn't right for them. So those are the main reasons that people leave. But I need to go back to that relationship between the employee and the boss, because if you've got a bad boss, I don't know, all of us have had a stint or two in corporate America, whether it was big corporate or even little corporate. But the reality is, but the reality is, if you've got a boss who's barking up your backside all the time, it's like, oh, get me out of here. It makes the day, it makes the week, it makes your contribution feel disvalued. And I think at the end of the day, I know all of us want to go to work and feel like our contribution is valued and respected and making a difference in people's lives. So when your boss comes in and immediately disowns, the value or the contribution, it's like, well, excuse me, this is not a good thing. And so most of corporate America is waking up to the reality that the boss could be that, actually the key to retention, but they're not all there yet.
Right. Now, I've got a quick question for you, Linda. Do you see this?
Dan, you've got a bad echo on your end. Sorry.
Is it me?
Yeah, because it sounds like it's a little bit better. And give it a try.
It shouldn't be me because I've got noise canceling headphones in. So the question I have is, do you see this playing out in the strata of the different age groups? So the baby boomers and the Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, millennials is because, I've got two kids that would fit into the Gen Z, the millennials to Gen Z. And boy, I don't know. It's more of a free agent society out there anyway, is what I observe. And that loyalty piece, sometimes they just like, they don't, it's not going to work out. And it's just in the past, I think, at least for my folks and my grandparents, it was get on board, buckle down, get her done. And be thankful you have a job, that sort of thing. So I don't know. I'm just looking to you. Do you see that broken down by age group, Lynden, in your work?
So no question. If we were the silent generation, which is in many cases our parents, are ahead of us, and boomers. So we all were raised with the kind of suck it up mentality.
Suck it up, buttercup. Let's get going, baby.
Work, and you got to be there. But what's happened is the Gen Y generation watched their parents. They were the original latchkey kids, and they watched their parents go to work and work so hard that they're of the mind that there's got to be more to work than there is. And it's the Gen Y generation that is really in key leadership positions right now. And I'm not dissing them, please. That's not really the intent of my conversation about this. I think what I was hearing in your question is there's a difference in the perception of our loyalty to our employer. And I don't know that it's fair necessarily to say that the standard that a boomer would bring, the loyalty standard that a boomer would bring is the same as what a millennial would bring, because we're wired differently, we're oriented differently. So in terms of being engaged in our work and paying attention to the kind of opportunities that we have to contribute in the workplace, we just are different animals. And so being in a work culture that respects the differences across the generations is really what's key. And it's creating that culture that blends and communicates well, and where the leadership understands that the one-size-fits-all type of management style is not what's going to work in this complex environment.
That is a great point.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
Lynden, I know that we're talking about, because you've been a corporate recruiter for so long, but I also know that you're an entrepreneur. So you have employees working for you virtually, as well as you have some local help that helps you out with that. So when we're talking about this, it really, we can see the same thing happening whether we're a solo entrepreneur with virtual employees or whether we have somebody sitting beside us every day working in our business. And I think we still face those same challenges, is getting people to stay, for one, and inviting them into our businesses to help us grow, but yet, try to bring them along in the process. Am I hitting the mark on that? Okay.
You are so on the point. The reality is we've got to begin from where we start, which is being clear why we're here.
I'm sorry, Lynden, your audio is really kind of fading on us. Is there any way
choppy.
You can get? Yeah, it's very choppy.
Okay, I didn't make any changes, so I'm not sure what's going on, but it's really a matter. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it could be a bandwidth issue. If it gets much worse, we'll just have you pop out and pop back in. That seems to solve it sometimes.
Yeah, we promised that this time it would be easier.
All right, I gotcha. No, it's about being clear why you're here. And at the end of the day, when we're in that sweet spot where we understand why we come to work, and when we share that very clearly on a regular basis with the people that we're working with, and I don't care if we're talking about a shop of 2 and that virtual employee that you were talking about, or whether it's, large corporate America, everybody's got to be clear what the mission of the company is. And I go back to using kind of that old-fashioned phraseology of mission, vision, and values. But when you're clear why it is you're doing what you're doing, then people are more enrolled in why what they're doing contributes to that end game. And so even someone who does coaching like I do, or speaking, or that kind of training where you're on the platform and you're sharing your message, if I'm not clear about what my message is and why my message is important, then anybody who supports me, from someone who comes in part-time and helps me with some of my paperwork, to that kind of bigger virtual assistant in the over the rainbow, if you will, in that virtual room, they all need to have an appreciation of what it is I'm trying to do, so they can stay plugged in and feel like they're making a difference in my life. And then on the converse side of that comes the need for me to be sure that I'm showing gratitude for what's happening. So as a manager, as a boss, as a leader, going back, and this is very much a Ken Blanchard 1-minute manager, but being sure I have a chance to look in somebody's eyes. And again, when you're doing it virtually, that's the challenge. But in that looking in someone's eyes, figuring out what's going on for them and what's real for them, and then honoring them for the difference they make in my life, and in terms of getting my message out. So does that help, Wanda?
Yeah, it's very helpful. The thing is, I wish that our volume was a little bit better.
Yeah, Lynden, why don't you jump out and jump back in? Because sometimes, Balb is still in beta, guys, and all these streams are separate. If you'll jump out and jump back in, that will probably clear it out for us.
Okay.
Yeah, but what she's saying is so important. I want that audio track to be good, Wanda.
Yeah, me too.
I love what she said too. Be clear why you are here. And I always say, know your role. Know your role for X, whatever X is, because in different partnerships, we have different roles, right? Sometimes we're the lead. Sometimes we're playing second seat. Sometimes we're the supporter. Sometimes we're the one that needs the support. So that was good. I just she was kind of choppy on there.
Yeah. And it's like, I want to be sure that we can get Lynden's great advice.
Talk again, Lynden.
Especially here live and also on the replay later.
Exactly.
So great information that Lynden Kidd is providing us today in regards to how to keep your employees, because we know it's easier to keep an employee happy, whether they are, somebody that works with you side by side every day, or whether they're virtual. We need to be able to keep the people that we're working with that we are happy with, so that they stay happy, and that we can obviously one, save time in training, and also the money that goes behind getting someone new on, because it always costs more to bring in a new employee in than it does to keep an employee that you already have, right, Lynden?
Absolutely. Actually, there's a statistic that's interesting. Companies are really avoidant right now. They call it the avoidant economy, but they're resistant to a bad hire because it can cost a company anywhere from 3 to 27 times the base salary of the new hire if they screw up. And the 27 times, of course, is if a company hires a CEO wrong. But you can imagine by the time you make the investment before someone's hired, you onboard them, get them trained, live with them for a while, and then discover they're not a good fit. That's all of the kinds of expense that goes, and then you have to hire someone to replace them on the other side. That's an example of all the expense that goes into that bad hire. So we're seeing that it's the temp economy, it's the gig economy, it's what's happening for many, many, many people in the workforce, where they have serial, which means one after another, temporary assignments, and they are doing that because that's the way that they can make a living, because companies aren't hiring unless they absolutely need to, and then they're only hiring after they've tried someone out. So the temp gig, where you go work for 30, 60, 90 days, becomes kind of like the rent to own of the workforce, where the boss gets to see if you're really a good fit, and you get to see too. And I think the challenge for that is employees sometimes, because this temp economy is so challenging, they forget that they get to look around too when they're inside a company, and they get to decide if this is a place they want to hang, and if the values of the people that they work with align with who they are, and if they feel like their contribution is where they want it. But at the end of the day, the temp economy is alive and well, unfortunately, for many people.
Well,
yeah. Mindy makes a good point. The temp gig is also a place where they learn the skill and then move on.
We got to echo again, Dan. So sorry. So can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, the temp gig is also a place where they learn to go a skill and then move on. So sometimes you're hiring for the next company, right?
Which is exactly what the millennials are doing with their short tenure with the employers that they're with. They really embrace the go to work for a company because you want to learn a skill or a task or a function, and then take that to the next place you go. And so that whole philosophy is alive and well.
So I know that before we decided to do this talk, you had given us some statistics, and the one that I find really interesting is that more than 2 million U.S. employees quit their jobs every month, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. When I saw that particular thing, I was like, wow. 2 million people, that's huge.
That is huge, but you've also got to remember people are quitting their jobs for a number of different reasons. It's not just because they're dissatisfied with their boss or with their employer, but some of them are natural retirements at an appropriate age. Others are people who are ill and having to step out for whatever reason. Others are, some is just that unhappy with what they're doing, want to move on to do something else. And we know this too, we've all had friends who simply just needed to move on because either a spouse was relocating or it was just time to do something different. So, but that number is pretty overwhelming, isn't it, Wanda?
It's huge. And Dan, I see that Mindy has put in a comment. What is she saying there? Do you want to tell our audience?
Oh, they're learning the skill in hopes of starting their own. So Mindy, for those just full disclosure, Mindy is a business partner of mine and is a strategy coach. And so we've talked about this a lot because we are actually trying to get entrepreneurs to go grow their business into a quote unquote real company. We'll get them to the stability part and to the success part. And sometimes people hire on for the express purpose of learning the skill so you're hiring your competition sometimes, whether that's covertly or overtly, and whether you know it or not, you could be hiring your competition. And I agree with Lynden. It all goes right back to relationships. And knowing and like you said, getting eyeball to eyeball. I think you used that a while ago, Lynden, making sure that you're engaging these people and finding out, because when there's disengagement, then that leads to all kinds of challenges and issues.
Yeah. And, for me, because I have a marketing agency, I do hire out quite a bit for skill sets that we don't have in-house. And but I do make people sign non-competes because, they are going to be engaging with clients that I paid to get in contact with one way or another, whether it was advertising, working my referral networks or whatever the case may be. So I use that. It's not to say they can't pick up a skill set, while they're still working, but they just can't directly compete with me and that particular client. So do you find that people are doing that in their business as well, Lynden?
I don't have a lot of experience with people inviting non-competes, although I think it's a tremendous practice. I guess I want to ask you a question about that. When you introduce the non-compete, tell me about the context in which you do that, because I think that would make the difference. There's some folks that find a non-compete to be threatening. It's kind of like a prenup. Are you kidding? You don't love me? So what is it? How is you're building the context? Because that's obviously allowing the whole conversation around the non-compete to be okay, to be an okay term for their employment.
Yeah, if I'm going to work with somebody, it is a make it or break it kind of situation for me, because when I find someone and I really like them, I want to bring them on as a teammate, because that's how I look at them, is that they are going to be a teammate. But a lot of people, I'd say everybody that I work with has their own business. So because they have their own business, I have my own business, and they come to work with me in my business as a teammate. They realize that a non-compete is part of the, I guess you could say, contract that we have between each other. We do a contract that says non-compete, as well as, what they can be expected to get paid for. They have to submit to me the information as to what their expectations are. And Mindy's going to join us. I'm going to add her in. But they have to submit to me what their expectations are. And I just find that it just makes a healthy place for both of us to be. So they understand what my expectations are, and I understand what their expectations are. And we've talked about this, way before we even start working together, because it is kind of a marriage in a lot of sense, with a prenup.
Yeah. Well, and I think the point that you made, which was really well taken, they're adding skills to your business that you're saying you don't specialize in.
Right.
So they're truly complementing you, versus, let's say, bringing someone in who's picking up a task or picking up a responsibility. It's like, I can do some of the administrative things in my work, but that's not necessarily what's a good use of my time, the best use of my time.
Right.
So focusing in another area is different. So I can't necessarily see inviting, say, an admin to do a non-compete, because she's not going to be competing with me in my coaching or my speaking or my training. But in your situation, yeah, they could be trying to steal your clients, and it makes a lot of sense that you would have that agreement and create the context for that not to happen.
And I go back to how it's presented, because I think all information, this is part of our system, and we would love to have you work with us as long as you understand these are the parameters in which you engage our people. And it's funny, because we've got Mindy helped a young lady here in town establish a VA business, Wanda. And we have a high-producing realtor that needed a VA. His choice not to use her was because he thought she would try to take his information and engage other realtors, and he wanted someone that would give him 100% attention. So therefore, he wouldn't engage with her. And that was a business decision. It didn't make either one of them a bad person. It was just a business decision for that, Yeah. So I've seen that cut. I've seen that work for the person that may be receiving it or the person that may be presenting it. So
right. Well, and Mindy, thank you for joining us on this conversation. We appreciate it. I'm just going to tell anybody who's just joined us recently, we're talking about why employees leave and is the grass really greener on the other side. And it's not just about people that you maybe have sitting next to you and that are, like your hourly employee. It could be somebody that you're working with at arm's length that's a virtual employee, like a virtual assistant. In my case, I work with developers and coders and graphic artists. So that's what our discussion is about today. And our guest expert is Lynden Kidd. And Lynden has been sharing a wealth of information with us. And Dan is joining as my co-host today, Dan Goodwin. And Mindy just came on, and Mindy, welcome.
Wanda, let me just say something real quick. Due to the technical difficulties, I have a hard stop in 30 seconds. That's why I asked Mindy to come on. I am so sorry that I have got to vacate the co-host chair. Okay.
Okay.
I know,
problem.
but listen, you are in good hands with Mindy. You guys, this is great. I can't wait to get back to the computer at about 9 o'clock tonight so I can watch the replay and find out what I missed. And I apologize again, Wanda and Lynden, both for bailing
not
on
a
you.
problem. Not a problem. Thank you, Dan, for getting
right.
Lynden on for us.
Thanks for your help. I so appreciate it.
No worries. My pleasure. And I know we'll talk again soon, ladies. Talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye, Dan.
Bye.
Mindy, thank you so much for helping us out and taking Dan's co-spot.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Good.
Do you have any questions for Lynden up to this point?
Well, actually, I had a comment going back to the non-disclosure and the non-compete.
Okay.
I would have the admin sign the non-compete. I would have anybody working within my business sign the non-compete and the non-disclosure because of this concept called latent learning. And over time, they're going to glean a lot of skills, a lot of education just by watching you operate. And there may be some trade secrets that they come across that they may decide, wow, I've learned enough after being here for 6 months or 2 years that I'm going to go try my hand at that. And I've seen it happen with car dealerships. I've seen it happen with all sorts of restaurants, all sorts of businesses, where suddenly the person that you train and you invested all of that in is now your primary competitor. And it also puts them on a level playing field of everybody else in the business. So they feel that wow, I had to sign the same non-disclosure, non-compete as the graphic artist or the voiceover artist or whatever or the mechanic or whatever the industry is, the head chef, because
Right.
they are going to learn just by being in that space. So that's the only thing that I would change just a little bit is what I would do for one, I will be willing to do for all that come into my inner circle.
Okay.
Absolutely. And that's how I've always operated my business from day one. And it's not to say that, like I said, most of the people that I work with have their own businesses,
Right.
but usually because of what I do in marketing, most of them are working with agencies like myself. So they're not looking at the individual client, but I have seen it where individual clients will try to say, oh, well, if I can get you for less, we can work directly together. And it kind of, it for me, that protects me more that way because of that level of intimacy in my business. And then, somebody maybe trying to just, I guess, go the less expensive route by thinking that if they cut out the middleman, they'll save some money. So, Lynden, you also talked about a variety of other things that you could actually talk about today, I should say. And one of the things is that you said, what needs to change for us to be able to keep people happy within our business? So what other kinds of words of wisdom can you share with us in regards to that?
Right. And I'm going to refer to my notes so I don't forget anything because I was always clear in that moment. But when we talk about what needs to change and when we think about creating a more suitable, if you will, or a more comfortable workplace, we want to be sure that we're inviting our employees to use skills that they know they're good at. In other words, they've got to feel like they're competent. They've got to feel like what they're doing is something that's not hard, it kind of flows for them. The other thing is, again, and it relates to that they're known for. So it's an area in which they're perceived already to be an expert. And maybe not the leading expert, but at least within the group, within the company group. The other is that we be sure that we recognize them for what they do. And that goes back to our conversation before, that 1 minute management concept of looking them in the eye and just checking in and offering that moment of recognition. And then in bigger companies, thinking about formal recognition programs and how we honor the contribution of the people on our teams. I know most companies are exceptional, for example, at honoring the contribution of the sales force because that's easier to calculate in many respects. But being thoughtful about recognition programs throughout the organization. And then the last is being sure that we have our employees have values that line up with our company values. Mm-hmm. What I mean by that is taking our employees through an exercise where they have some appreciation of what they value about the work that they do. And as a manager or as the company as a leader works with those employees to help them align that sense of value and contribution with the company. So again, we go back to that kind of all over big picture sense that we're all pulling the rope in the same direction and that we're all contributing in a way that adds value and meaning to the bottom line. And the bottom line isn't just money. It's improving people, it's improving processes, it's improving productivity, it's making our product better, whether it's a service or a widget, but that everybody has a finger in it, and nobody's forgotten, nobody's left behind.
Right. Well, and great information there, Lynden. Great information, and we want to invite our audience also to participate in this conversation. Thank you, Mindy, for joining in, and ask a question to Lynden, because there's not many opportunities that you get a highly seasoned professional like Lynden where you can just pick her brains about best practices within your business, whether it's a little business or whether it's a big business. And so if you have a question, you could do /Q in our chat box, and Mindy will be glad to tell me when somebody has a question. Also, if you'd like to jump in, we have saved an open seat here for you to be able to jump in and join us on this conversation. So please let us know if you have any questions. Now, Lynden, what is the best way for people to reach out to you in your business?
Thanks. There's a couple of different ways. Obviously, the first would be, I'm getting an echo now. Is it better?
You're good on my end.
Okay, good. All right, so the first would be to reach me out, or I'm going to speak English now. Reach out to me through email, and that's Lynden, and my name is spelled Lynden, at lyndenkidd.com. So that's LYNDENKIDD.com. And or call my phone number, my cell number, which is area code 267-337-2622. I'm happy to talk with people from a discovery perspective to see if there's ways that I can assist either formally or informally with the work that I do. As I said, I not only do coaching and training for folks who are looking at their careers, but part of a lot of the work that I do, Wanda, actually is around expectations. Because what I'm observing with many of my clients right now is they've reached a stage in their life where they expected things to be different. And so they're dealing with that disconnect between, I thought I'd get to my X whatever years of experience and I'd be in a different place, and I'm not. And so I'm not sure why I'm unhappy. And I think a lot of times when we're not being as effective in the work that we do, we're feeling dissatisfied with the work that we do, that it's around other things beyond just the work. And so looking closely at that is an important part. I do want to say one other thing. The last part associated with keeping people in their jobs is having them have a clear sense of what their career development options are. Because if you get someone who's in a terminal situation where they know they can't go anywhere, they can't move up, they can't move down, they can't move back, they're just stuck, that can be really boring.
Yeah.
You find people, just want to disengage from the work that they're doing simply because they've done it forever. They know every answer. They've seen every scenario. So what we've observed, and especially with our corporate American examples, is we see companies that do really well by allowing employees to shift. So maybe they take their expertise to another division or another department, if it makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so, or maybe we deploy them differently. So maybe we don't have a centralized HR department. Maybe we send them out into the field and have them be attached to various divisions. And so the HR group that was really getting kind of bored and not being very challenged by the work that they do, they learn because they're suddenly in the field and they're re-energized by being shoulder to shoulder with the people that they're serving. So I think there's creative ways both company and employees can figure out how to be more engaged about the work that they do, how they can find more meaningful ways to contribute with the employers that they're with. And with that said, I guess I have to end by saying sometimes the grass isn't greener on the other side, and that figuring out how to make the work that you're doing work for you, work for your employer, is really the sweet spot. You're already there, you just maybe have forgotten that you're there. So with that said.
Well, and also, again, if you're a small business owner and maybe you have a virtual team, bringing it back to that solo entrepreneur maybe, is having really good discussions with your teammate, right? It's like making sure that you're challenging them and keeping them involved to the point where they're going to stay happy with working with you, right?
Absolutely. And even just using like this Balb framework as an opportunity to get everybody together for a meeting. There are, there's great tools, as you well know.
Right.
Whether we're talking about Zoom or Constant Contact or GoToMeeting, those kinds of tools where you can create a room and get everybody in the same space, even when they're not physically in the same community, so they can be all around the same flip chart, if you will. I mean, it wouldn't be that tough just using this environment to pull up a flip chart and to start making some notes for everybody and to do some real true team building and expectation generating together, again, keeping everybody on the same page and aligned with what the big picture is for the outcomes that you want to produce.
Well, and I've had a client of mine who has part virtual, part local employees involved in their business, and what they do is that once a year have everybody get into the same physical space for a retreat, like a little company retreat. And I think that really connects people a little bit better. It's sort of like, when you're connected to somebody on social media and you have this great relationship, you might know them from doing a Balb or from, just commenting back and forth on social media. But when you get a chance to meet them at a conference or something, it's like you feel like, wow, I've known you forever, but this is the first time we've really ever met. And I think it brings that closeness that you can't get at arm's length all the time. And obviously, it just depends on geography as to if that's a reality or not for people.
Oh, and you make a great point with that, Wanda, because you know as well as I do, even if you're piggybacking, say, on another conference, going with members of your team, say, to a national meeting of an association or a society or a group that you're a part of, that's a great place to do that team building, corporate development on either the before side or the after side of that national meeting, where you're all getting charged up and getting a sense of best practices in the industry. Right. So I use that as a technique as well. When my team was dispersed across the whole country, we'd go to like a national association meeting, and that would be a great forum to not only get to know those people and play with them a little bit, because all work and no play is a bad thing too. So having a chance to play and to do that generous company and team building is also important.
Yeah.
So I have a question.
Go ahead.
Because this has come up with probably 5 or 6 clients in just the last month, where their staff works virtually and then they have co-work days where they try to bring them together once a week. And some of the employees are working better virtually and some work better in the co-work space. And so there's a level of dissatisfaction for the ones that don't work well in the opposite space. So how do we handle that? Because so many of us are allowing our employees to office from their house, and then you get the feedback that, oh, I'm working 12-hour days, when really they are working over a 12-hour period, but it's not a constant 12 hours. And so there's a level of dissatisfaction that they have because of time management and so forth. What would you say to those employers that are struggling with this virtual and co-work dilemma?
So the key is keeping the employees engaged and putting them in the environment in which they work best. And it might be going back to depending on the direction that the company's going. Let's use the folks that don't do well at home as an example. Having been self-employed many years, as I know all of us in this group are, and have worked at home, there's a level of discipline around being successful in this environment. And it's, you can't necessarily keep the cleanest house and think you're going to do a good job of working from home if you're working from home. So then maybe what I'm trying to say is, maybe working from home, if it's not working for those folks, the company should say, well, you're welcome to come back into the work environment or the co-work environment. Because if that's allowing you to feel more productive and that you're a better contributor, at the end of the day, that's really what's most important. And not necessarily this, oftentimes companies make arbitrary decisions that we're going to do 50% in the office and 50% out. And it's like, well, this 50%, what is this magic 50%? Is that, where did the number come from? And it doesn't apply maybe appropriately to everyone. So my advice would be to rethink that for all of the folks involved and find out, even if it, like I said, if it was a magic 50%, maybe some of those folks who do better at home and aren't as effective in the co-work environment, maybe having an opportunity to revisit that. So while it's important to have co-work time to connect with your colleagues, maybe instead of 50%, it jumps down to 20 or 10% instead.
Makes sense. I mean, experimenting with that, of course, those are some of the recommendations that I've given her, this one particular client. But it seems to be something that is continually coming up because companies did want to reduce overhead by allowing people to office at home. And so there's really a lot of implications about making a change, because if they downsize their office so that people could office out of their homes, and now they're looking at having to increase office space again so people can come back in. It's not just as simple of a solution, because you have leases to deal with and you have economics to deal with of the company. So it is a bit of a challenge to meet that mix. And it's interesting because those that are dissatisfied on some levels start thinking the grass is going to be greener again somewhere else, and they're just going to meet the same challenges. And the other thing that I have come up with is people that are hiring for companies are, I'll never forget a gal I was talking to. She said, oh, I started interviewing people for my new position that I just took. I need to bring on 5 people. And they were all millennials. They all wanted flexible work times. They wanted to be able to work at 3 o'clock in the morning, not, at an 8 to 5-er. And she was like, no, we start at 8 o'clock and we end at 5. And that's just how we're going to do it. I don't understand why these millennials just can't get with the program. And it was a very interesting conversation. And I never was able to convince her that perhaps we need to look at what the millennials value in a workspace and then make the determination. Because the talent pool that they were bringing in this particular industry was an absolute necessity for the position, but it wasn't going to be an 8 to 5er. Just wasn't. Any suggestions that of words of wisdom I could have given her?
Oh, Mindy, it sounds like you already handled it.
She didn't have the answer she wanted, though.
Well, no, but you couldn't give her the answer she wanted, because the answer she wanted was which group's going to fit best in the 8 to 5, and it's not necessarily going to be the millennials. So, at least right now, where the millennials are, at least right now in their careers, they want more flexibility. So, she's not going to be that successful until she decides to modify something.
Yeah, I think expectations have to be realistic. Like you have to know if you're looking for a particular skill set. For instance, with development, I've personally found that people, and granted, guys and gals out there that are developers, not everybody is a social butterfly in that particular type of work. Sometimes they like their solitude and they don't want to engage with the client. And that's fine. That's where I come in. But I think you have to know, it's like when you have a particular task in mind, what your expectations are going to need to be for that particular skill set. And if, you know, and individual, obviously, because everybody's going to be a little bit different. So I know that we're at the top of the hour, Lynden, and I totally appreciate the fact that it took you a while to get on with our Balb here. And it is in beta, so nothing is perfect. But I really appreciate your efforts in getting on so that we could get so much great information from you. And thank you for those who've joined us in on this conversation. If you're joining us for the replay, thank you there as well. I know that we've had some little bit of glitches with the audio today, so bear with us if it comes and goes. We don't really have control on that, but please listen throughout the conversation if you are in the replay so that you can get the valuable information that Lynden has there for you, whether you're a solo entrepreneur or whether you're a company or whether you're a large corporation. All these things matter and are important in order to retain good people with great skill sets. So thank you, Lynden. Thank you, Mindy, for jumping in and co-hosting. And we appreciate you guys. And we'll have another Balb next Monday, so keep a lookout. Thank you so much. And everybody have a good day. Bye.
Bye. Appreciate it.